was the 19-year-old daughter to Shannon Grice and Richard Green, living a young and carefree life in Brighton, East Sussex, on the southern coast of England. She was a bright young woman and the apple of her parents' eye, who was hardworking as well. In the summer of 2015, she began a job working for Bright Fire Alarms as an office receptionist. She was engaged at this time to a man named Ashley Cook and was excited she was working for a company that would allow her to make enough money to save for her wedding. But all that would change when she met Michael Lane, a 26-year-old mechanic that was working at the company as well. There was an instant attraction between the two, and even though Grice was already spoken for, she liked the attention that Lane was giving her. The two started secretly dating for the next couple of months, which caused confusion for Grice on who she wanted to be with. Grice ultimately chose to remain in her relationship with her fiancé and broke things off with Lane. But she would soon learn that Lane would not be easy to break things off with. Not long after the split, Lane started sending flowers to the office for Grice, which made her uncomfortable, and she reported her discomfort to her boss. When Lane found out about this, the attention started turning more negatively aggressive. There were times that Grice would walk to her vehicle, leaving work, and she would see things had been done to her car, such as being keyed. One day, Grice walked out to her car to find her tires had been slashed. When observing the car, Lane showed up out of nowhere, offering his assistance. But the more that Grice denied him, the more aggressive he became in his actions. So much to where he started targeting her fiancé Ashley by keying his car as well and leaving a note on his windshield exposing Grice's infidelity. Grice had finally had enough and reported Lane's actions to the local Sussex authorities, in which instead of arresting him, they gave him a warning to leave Grice alone, and he did for a short period of time. But eventually, he started harassing Grice again. On the night of March 24th, Lane showed up to Grice's home and chased her down the street, attacking her by pulling her hair and trying to snatch things out of her hands, such as her phone. She immediately reported the incident to the authorities, but when they brought Lane in for questioning, he provided information on his phone that gave investigators the impression that he and Grice were still involved. After this, the authorities turned their attention to Grice, stating that they now believed that due to the lack of information that she provided to the authorities about the nature of her and Lane's on and off again relationship, that she was not being 100% forthcoming, and decided to fine her 90 euros, which is $116 in American money, for what they said to have been a waste of their time. It was clear afterwards that the authorities would not be of much help to her, and so Grice's family and friends organized communication between them, just in case they ever had a hard time getting in touch with her. And she also ended up quitting her beloved job at the Brighton Fire Alarms Company. Being that Grice was so young and had never dealt with anything this severe before, she didn't know how to handle Lane's actions all the time. So oddly, she still kept in touch with him, and was also in fear of what would happen if she were to cut off communication with him completely. But she remained firm on remaining with her fiancé. She arranged one day for Lane to come and get whatever he had left at her home prior, so that they could be done. But what she didn't know is that he obtained the key to her back door and began entering the home while she was asleep. When she realized her keys were missing, she automatically knew who was responsible. She contacted Lane to question him about the missing keys, but this time, she decided to take the advice of the police and recorded the phone call. He admitted to taking the keys on the recording and apologized. Afterwards, Shana provided the audio to the police. But even with the audio of him admitting to stealing her keys and breaking into her home without her knowing, once again, the only thing they did was give Lane a warning. And once again, Lane didn't listen. His actions became even more intense when he placed a tracking device under her car and was tracking her every move in the vehicle. Grice was never aware that there was a tracking device on her vehicle. One evening, Lane snuck over to Grice's home to change the batteries in the tracking device when he noticed her boyfriend leaving the home. This was the final trigger for Lane. When seeing that everyone was gone except for Grice, he broke into the home again, entered her bedroom, and cut her throat while she was sleeping, taking her life in seconds. He tried to set fire to the scene afterwards to cover up the evidence of his involvement, but was unsuccessful, being that there was footage of Lane purchasing questionable items from the store earlier that day. The most important thing that was recorded was Lane going to the ATM after stealing Grice's credit card to withdraw cash from her account. This would be the evidence that the authorities needed to finally capture Michael Lane. In March of 2017, Michael Lane was found guilty of Grice's murder and was sentenced to 25 years in prison. In the final statements from the judge, he addressed Lane and said that he was disappointed in the lack of remorse that Lane seemed to have for the life that was taken and the pain that he caused her family, and that the only person that he seemed to feel sorry for was himself. But Lane wasn't the only one that the judge had words for. He also addressed the Sussex Police Department. He spoke to the lack of seriousness from the police department and how it was very unacceptable that due to the fact that Grice had been romantically involved with Lane and that she was vulnerable to him at times, that they poorly judged the situation and did not do their jobs properly, and that the reason why Grice stopped reporting things to the authorities was that after things happened and things were turned around on her, she no longer felt safe trusting police to help her. And these actions gave Michael Lane the feeling of being invincible. Alyssa Blanton was born September 9th, 1986, in Festus, Missouri. Alyssa was a hard-working college graduate of Jefferson College and studied to become a teacher, which at the age of 21 was her dream job. She also loved spending time with her family and had a very big heart and was very sweet, which made it easy for her to fit right in when she became a waitress for a Hooters restaurant in Merritt Island, Florida. There were many regular customers that visited the restaurant from time to time, but there was one customer that came more than usual. That customer was Roger Troy, age 61. Roger Troy took a liking to Alyssa, and anytime he came in, he made it a point to always sit in a section she waited on. Alyssa noticed after a while that Troy was coming in every day, but she wasn't immediately alarmed and always tried to remain friendly with him. Eventually, Troy started trying to spark up conversation and constantly asked for things so that Alyssa would come over to his table. But things started to take a disturbing turn when Troy started asking Alyssa for her phone number constantly. Thrown off by this, she always tried to avoid the question, but after him asking constantly, Alyssa decided to give him her email to an email account that she hadn't used that often so that he would stop asking. Despite Alyssa denying Troy's advances, he over time in his mind believed that in some way the two had a thing for one another, which is why he always left her abnormally generous tips. Alyssa reached her breaking point when he started becoming a little too touchy-feely when she would come to the table to serve him, so she decided to report his actions to her manager. And her manager approached Troy and let him know that his behavior towards Alyssa was inappropriate, and that they had strict rules against customers touching the staff. Troy didn't take this well, but even when the manager tried to assist, Alyssa was unaware of just how bad things were about to get. After that day, Alyssa decided to look at her email. When she did, she found hundreds of emails from Troy, disturbing emails, calling her a whore and a tramp, amongst other things. She decided to report the emails to the authorities, but even with the evidence of harassment that she presented, there were no legal consequences that Troy faced. Feeling like she had no other choice, she decided to quit her waitressing job, since in this case she felt as if she was alone and out of options. And she'd hoped that this would be the one thing to end her problems with Troy. She got another job, but it was not long when Troy found the location of that job and continued his actions. When this happened, Alyssa's boyfriend at the time made the suggestion for them to move, and both of them got a job working at an AT&T call center in the same building. For a while things calmed down, Alyssa married her boyfriend, and they were feeling like things were falling into place. But all of that changed when they found a note left outside their home from Troy. After that, the email started up again, with messages speaking to the actions that he didn't approve of, such as getting married and how angry he was that she had. Alyssa and her husband gathered all the evidence over time and decided to take it to the courthouse. But even with all of the disturbing things that he had said and done, the judge stated that it was still not enough evidence for them to take action against Troy, and he refused to grant her protection order. On February 8, 2010, Alyssa's husband drove her to work. After sitting and talking in the parking lot for a moment, Alyssa kissed her husband and left the vehicle. As she was walking to the building, Troy showed up out of nowhere, stopping Alyssa. No one knows the words that were exchanged, but Alyssa was heavily alarmed and called for her husband, who was still in the car in the parking lot. He jumped out of his car as fast as he could and headed towards Alyssa. As he was trying to get to her, Troy pulled out a gun and shot Alyssa 10 times, and then turned the gun around on himself. Alyssa was rushed to the hospital, but sadly lost her life later on that day, and Troy died on the scene. After Alyssa's death, women activists heard about the tragedy and called the judge into question that refused a protection order for Alyssa, even after she had made many attempts to provide evidence. But even after the events that took place, the judge still felt that he did nothing wrong and simply followed the law.